"Mom, I can feel my toes." The words came out as barely a whisper, trembling and uncertain, as if speaking them too loudly might shatter whatever impossible thing was happening. 19-year-old Emma Ashford stood in the middle of a cluttered garage in a working-class San Diego neighborhood, her hands gripping the edge of a worn wooden workbench, her entire body shaking with something she had not allowed herself to feel in over a decade. Hope. Victoria Ashford, CEO of a billion-dollar biotechnology empire, a woman whose face had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune, whose name commanded respect in boardrooms across 3 continents, dropped to her knees on the oil-stained concrete floor. Her designer red dress pooled around her like spilled wine, and she did not care. She did not care about anything except the impossible words her daughter had just spoken. 11 years. 11 years of the best doctors money could buy. 11 years of experimental treatments, cutting-edge therapies, and promises that crumbled to dust. 11 years of watching her daughter retreat further and further into resignation, accepting a fate that no mother should ever have to witness. And now, her daughter's miracle had come from a mechanic in a run-down garage, a single father with grease under his fingernails, and a promise to a brother who was no longer alive to see it fulfilled. But before we witness this moment of impossible joy, we need to go back. Back to a warm Thursday morning 3 months earlier, when none of them knew that their lives were about to collide in ways that would change everything forever. The garage sat wedged between an aging industrial zone and a row of modest houses that had seen better decades. The kind of neighborhood where people worked with their hands and knew their neighbors' names and did not expect much from the world except a fair chance to earn an honest living. The smell of motor oil hung permanent in the air, mingling with hot metal and the salty Pacific breeze that drifted in from the ocean, just a few miles west. Nathan Cole had spent nearly his entire adult life within these concrete walls that had cracked with time and weather, surrounded by tools that had passed through 3 generations of coal men before him. He was 38 years old, though the gray threading through his dark hair and the permanent exhaustion in his kind eyes made him look older. His hands were calloused from years of work, scarred in places from accidents and near misses, but they moved with a precision and gentleness that seemed almost impossible given their roughness. On this particular Thursday morning, he was bent over the exposed engine of a 19 pickup truck that belonged to Mrs. Patterson, from 2 streets over, a widow who could not afford a new car and could not afford to be without one. Nathan had told her he would fix it for the cost of parts only, same as he always did for neighbors who were struggling. Perched on an overturned bucket near the workbench, watching her father with the intense concentration of a surgeon observing a complex operation, sat 7-year-old Lily Cole. She had her mother's dark eyes, the ones Nathan still saw in his dreams sometimes, and her Uncle Ryan's stubborn chin that jutted forward when she was thinking hard about something. Her small hands were folded in her lap, and she had not taken her gaze off her father's work for the past 20 minutes. "Daddy, why do you always talk to the engines?" Nathan smiled without looking up, his fingers continuing their careful work on a corroded fuel line. "Because they tell me what is wrong if I listen carefully enough, sweetheart. Every machine has its own voice, its own way of saying what hurts and what needs fixing. You just have to pay attention." Lily considered this with the gravity that only a 7-year-old could bring to a philosophical question. She tilted her head to the side, her dark ponytail swinging. "Can you hear what is wrong with people too?" Nathan's hands paused for just a moment, hovering over the engine. It was such a simple question, asked with such innocent curiosity, but it landed somewhere deep in his chest, where he kept the things he did not talk about. the promise, the guilt, the brother he could not save, and the wife he had lost too soon. "Sometimes, sweetheart," he said softly, returning to his work. "Sometimes, if we pay close enough attention, we can see what other people miss. We can hear what someone needs, even when they cannot say it out loud." "Is that a superpower?" Nathan chuckled, finally looking up at his daughter with a warmth that transformed his tired face. "Maybe. A small one. Not the kind that gets you into movies, but the kind that lets you help people when they need it most." Lily nodded seriously, filing this information away with all the other important things her father had taught her. Then she perked up her attention, suddenly caught by something outside the garage's open bay door. Her eyes went wide with excitement. "Daddy, look, it is a princess car." Nathan straightened up and wiped his hands on a rag that had long since given up any pretense of cleanliness. The sound reached him before he turned around a purr of an engine so smooth and expensive that it seemed almost offensive in this neighborhood of dented sedans and pickup trucks held together by prayer and duct tape. A black Bentley was pulling up outside his garage, its polished surface reflecting the California morning sun like a dark mirror. Something shifted in Nathan's chest, an instinct he had learned to trust over years of reading machines and people alike. This was not a customer looking for a cheap oil change or a desperate neighbor with a car that would not start. This was something else entirely. "Stay inside, Lily," he said quietly. "Let me see what they need, but Daddy, it is so pretty. Can I just look at it?" "You can look from here, sweetheart. Just stay in the garage for now." "Okay." Lily nodded reluctantly, but her eyes remained fixed on the gleaming vehicle as it came to a stop just outside the bay door, and Nathan walked toward it with a strange certainty building in his gut that whatever was about to happen would matter. He could not have explained how he knew this. He just did. "Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you are watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel." The driver's door opened first, and a man in a formal black suit stepped out with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years performing this exact action. He moved around to the rear passenger door and opened it with a slight bow. And then Nathan saw her. Victoria Ashford stepped out of the Bentley like she was stepping onto a stage, which in many ways she always was. Her blonde hair caught the California sunlight and seemed to glow with it, perfectly styled, in waves that cascaded just past her shoulders. She was wearing a form-fitting red dress that hugged every curve of her body with the kind of elegant precision that only came from designers whose names Nathan could not pronounce, and matching heels that clicked against the cracked pavement with each step she took. Diamond earrings caught the light and threw tiny rainbows onto the concrete. Everything about her screamed wealth and power, and a world so far removed from this garage that she might as well have descended from another planet. But Nathan noticed something else, something that all the designer clothes and perfect hair could not quite hide. The way she held herself was almost too rigid, too controlled, like someone who was terrified of what might happen if she allowed herself to relax, even for a moment. And her eyes, despite their sharp intelligence, carried a shadow underneath them that spoke of sleepless nights and burdens that money could not lift. She looked around the garage with barely concealed disappointment, her gaze traveling over the stained concrete floor, the cluttered workbenches, the ancient tools hanging on pegboards that had been there since Nathan's grandfather had opened this place 50 years ago. Whatever she had expected to find here, this clearly was not it. Then the driver moved to the other rear door, and Nathan understood. The wheelchair emerged first, a sleek and expensive-looking device that probably cost more than Nathan earned in 6 months. And sitting in it was a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with her mother's blonde hair, but none of her mother's fierce energy. She was beautiful in a fragile way, like a flower pressed between pages of a book, preserved, but no longer alive in the way flowers were meant to be. Her shoulders slumped forward slightly. Her hands lay limp in her lap, and her eyes, when they briefly met Nathan's, held absolutely nothing. No curiosity, no hope, no anger. Just the flat acceptance of someone who had stopped expecting anything from the world a long time ago. Victoria approached Nathan with the confident stride of a woman who was used to commanding attention in rooms full of powerful people, but he noticed the way her fingers kept straightening, invisible wrinkles in her dress, the way she glanced back at her daughter every few steps, as if afraid the girl might disappear. "I am sorry to bother you," she said, and her voice carried the practiced warmth of someone who had delivered countless speeches and presentations, but rarely had actual conversations. "Our car developed some kind of engine problem on Pacific Coast Highway. My driver managed to get us this far, but he says it needs professional attention before we can continue." Nathan nodded slowly, his eyes moving past Victoria to the Bentley, and then to the young woman in the wheelchair, who had not moved or spoken or shown any sign that she was aware of what was happening around her. "What seems to be the issue?" Victoria shook her head, a small furrow appearing between her perfectly shaped eyebrows. "I am afraid I do not know much about cars." There was a strange noise, and then some kind of warning light appeared on the dashboard. My driver thought it might be the transmission, but he is not certain. "I can take a look," Nathan said. "Might take an hour or two to diagnose properly, though. You are welcome to wait inside if you would like. It is not fancy, but there is a couch, and I can make coffee." Victoria hesitated, clearly weighing the discomfort of waiting in a run-down garage against the inconvenience of finding alternative arrangements. She glanced back at her daughter again, and something in her expression shifted, a kind of desperate tiredness that she quickly suppressed. "That would be fine, thank you. I am Victoria Ashford, and this is my daughter Emma. Nathan Cole." He wiped his hand on his jeans before extending it, suddenly aware of the oil and grime that had become a permanent part of his skin. "Let me show you inside." As he led them through the garage toward the small attached office space where he and Lily lived, Nathan found his attention repeatedly drawn to Emma. Not because of her beauty, and not because of the wheelchair, but because of something else entirely. The way she sat in the chair, the angle of her spine, the slight grimace that crossed her face when the wheelchair rolled over a small bump in the concrete floor. He could see the edge of a metal brace beneath her loose-fitting blouse, a medical device designed to support her spine and help with mobility. It was clearly expensive and clearly state-of-the-art. And to Nathan's trained eye, the eye of a man who had spent years learning to see what others missed, it was clearly wrong. Not broken, not malfunctioning, just wrong for this particular body. Wrong for the way Emma naturally held herself, the way her weight distributed, the way her muscles had compensated over years of adaptation. It was like seeing a perfectly good engine installed in a car it was never designed for. Everything technically worked, but nothing worked well. Nathan filed this observation away and said nothing. It was not his place to comment. He was a mechanic, not a doctor. And these people were just passing through his life, a temporary inconvenience caused by car trouble, nothing more. But his eyes kept returning to that brace, to the discomfort in Emma's posture, to the resignation in her expression. And somewhere deep in his memory, he heard his brother's voice from a hospital bed 5 years ago, weak and fading, but still determined. "Promise me," Ryan had said. "If you ever get the chance, help people like me. Do not let them lose hope the way I did." Nathan pushed the memory aside and focused on being a good host. He showed Victoria and Emma to the small living area, apologized for the clutter of Lily's toys and his own books, and went to examine the Bentley. But even as his hands worked on the unfamiliar luxury engine, his mind kept wandering back to that brace and the young woman wearing it. Lily, ever curious, had planted herself in the doorway between the garage and the living area, watching the visitors with undisguised fascination. She looked at Emma's wheelchair with the straightforward curiosity of a child who had not yet learned that some things were supposed to make people uncomfortable. "Why are your legs broken?" Lily asked, because 7-year-olds did not know how to be indirect. Nathan started to call out a correction, but Victoria was faster. "Lily, that is not an appropriate question to ask someone you just met." But Emma spoke for the first time since arriving, her voice flat and tired. "They are not broken. They just do not work anymore." Lily considered this with the same seriousness she brought to all important matters. "Oh, that is sad. But my daddy can fix anything. Maybe he can fix your legs too." Victoria stiffened visibly, a flash of something like pain crossing her carefully composed face. "Lily, sweetheart, some things cannot be fixed. Emma has the best doctors in the world helping her." But Lily had already lost interest in the adults' conversation, her attention caught by a butterfly that had wandered into the garage. She ran off to chase it, leaving behind a silence that seemed to press against the walls. Nathan watched Victoria's face in the reflection of the Bentley's polished surface, watched the way she struggled to reassemble her composure, watched the way she looked at her daughter with a mixture of love and guilt, so intense it seemed to radiate from her like heat. And he wondered, not for the first time in his life, what kind of burden this woman was carrying, that even all her money and power could not ease. He turned back to the engine and lost himself in the familiar work, but his mind would not stop returning to Emma's brace, to the angle of her spine, to the simple observation that had occurred to him the moment he had seen her. Someone had built that brace for a generic problem. But Emma was not generic. No one was. And that, Nathan thought, was what everyone had missed. To understand what happened next, you need to understand who Nathan Cole really was and how he came to be the man standing in that garage on that particular Thursday morning. Because the truth is, Nathan was carrying a weight that would have crushed most people, a grief that had become so familiar. It felt like a second heartbeat, always there, always reminding him of what he had lost and what he had failed to save. 7 years ago, Nathan's wife, Sarah, had died giving birth to Lily. The pregnancy had been complicated from the beginning, but Sarah had insisted on carrying to term despite the doctor's warnings. She had wanted this baby more than anything in the world, and she had been willing to risk everything to bring her into it. Nathan remembered holding her hand in the delivery room, remembered the way she had smiled at him, even as her body was failing, remembered her whispered words before she slipped away. "Take care of our girl," she had said. "Promise me." He had promised, and he had kept that promise every single day since, even when the grief threatened to drown him. Even when raising a newborn alone seemed impossible, even when he wanted nothing more than to crawl into bed and never get up again. For Lily, he got up. For Lily, he kept going. For Lily, he learned to find joy in small moments, even when the larger picture of his life felt unbearably dark. But Sarah's death was not the only wound Nathan carried. 5 years ago, on an otherwise ordinary summer afternoon, Nathan had received a phone call that shattered what remained of his world. His younger brother, Ryan, 27 years old, and in the final year of his aerospace engineering degree at UC San Diego, had been in an accident. Ryan had always been the brilliant one, the one who would escape this working-class neighborhood and make something of himself. When they were teenagers, the two brothers would climb climb onto the roof of their parents' house, and watch planes take off from San Diego International Airport, sketching naive designs of jet engines and dreaming about futures that seemed limitless. Nathan was good with his hands, good with machines, but Ryan was good with ideas, with mathematics, with the kind of thinking that could change the world. But Ryan also loved the ocean. He loved the feeling of weightlessness that came from diving deep beneath the surface, loved the silence and peace of the underwater world. On that summer afternoon, he had gone scuba diving with friends at La Jolla Cove, a place they had visited dozens of times before. The accident happened so fast that no one could have prevented it. Ryan dove too deep, misjudged a current, and was thrown against submerged rocks with devastating force. The impact shattered 2 vertebrae and severed the bundle of nerves that controlled everything below his chest. Nathan still remembered the phone call with painful clarity. The doctor's voice had been cold and clinical, delivering the news with the detached efficiency of someone who had given similar speeches countless times before. Your brother has a T6 spinal cord injury. He will never walk again. I am sorry. Never walk again. 3 words that erased all of Ryan's dreams, all of his potential, all of the futures he had imagined for himself. He was 27 years old, brilliant, and full of promise, and in a single moment of bad luck, everything changed. Nathan had still been reeling from Sarah's death, still struggling to raise baby Lily alone, while working 3 jobs to keep the lights on and the bills paid. The small garage that had been his father's before a heart attack claimed him when Nathan was 18 was barely breaking even. Every dollar that came in went right back out to diapers and formula and electricity and rent on the small apartment above the shop. And then the doctors told them about an experimental surgery, a new procedure developed by specialists in Switzerland and that showed promise for patients with Ryan's type of injury. There was no guarantee it would work, but there was hope. Real hope, the kind that came from cutting-edge science and brilliant minds working at the edges of what was medically possible. The cost was $350,000, not including travel rehabilitation and follow-up care. Insurance would not cover experimental procedures. The hospital demanded payment up front. Nathan remembered sitting at his kitchen table after Lily had finally fallen asleep, staring at the number written on a piece of paper. $350,000. It might as well have been $350 million. It might as well have been the national debt. But this was his brother. This was Ryan, who had helped Nathan study for his high school diploma, who had held baby Lily in the hospital just hours after Sarah died, and promised his older brother that everything would be okay, who had never once made Nathan feel ashamed of being the one who stayed behind while he went off to college. So Nathan tried. He borrowed money from everyone he knew, emptied his savings account, sold everything he owned that had any value at all. He applied for loans and credit cards and charity programs. He stood in front of church groups and community organizations, his pride in pieces on the floor, begging for help. It was not enough. It was never enough. He raised maybe $40,000 a fortune by his standards, but barely 1/10 of what was needed. And then Ryan made a decision. Nathan would never forget that conversation, as long as he lived. He had been sitting in Ryan's hospital room surrounded by beeping machines and the antiseptic smell that never quite covered the undercurrent of suffering, explaining his latest failed attempt to raise money. Ryan had listened quietly, his handsome face thinner. Now his eyes dimmed, but still holding that familiar warmth. "Stop," Ryan had said finally, and the single word carried more weight than any speech could have. "Nathan, you have to stop." "I cannot," Nathan had protested, his voice breaking. "I cannot just give up on you. You are not giving up on me." Ryan's smile was the saddest thing Nathan had ever seen. You are taking care of your daughter. You are keeping yourself alive and healthy so that little girl has a father. That is not giving up. That is being exactly the man I always knew you were. But the surgery there is still time. I can figure something out. There is no more time. Ryan reached out and took his brother's hand, his grip weaker than it should have been, and even if there was, I cannot let you destroy yourself trying to save me. Lily needs you more than I need to walk again. Nathan had broken down then, sobbing in his brother's hospital room, all the grief and exhaustion and helplessness of the past years pouring out of him in an uncontrollable flood. Ryan had held his hand through all of it, steady and patient, being the strong one, even though he was the one trapped in a body that would never fully work again. I will be okay. Ryan had promised. I will figure out how to live with this, and you will figure out how to be an amazing dad. That is enough, Nathan. That is more than enough. But it was not enough. 4 years later, Ryan developed complications from his injury infections and breathing problems that accumulated over time. He spent his final months in and out of hospitals, his body failing piece by piece, while his mind remained sharp and aware of everything that was happening. The last conversation they had still echoed in Nathan's memory every single day. Ryan had been lying in a stark white hospital bed. His breathing labored, his hand gripping Nathan's with surprising strength, given how weak the rest of him had become. "Promise me something," Ryan had said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Anything." If you ever get the chance, Ryan's eyes had been intense, burning with a fire that his body could no longer contain. Help people like me. Do not let them lose hope the way I did. Promise me, Nathan. I promise, Nathan had said, crying openly. I promise, Ryan. I will find a way. Ryan had smiled, then peaceful at last, and closed his eyes. He died 3 hours later, holding his brother's hand. From that day forward, Nathan's life had taken on a new shape, a new purpose. After Lily fell asleep each night, he would return to the garage not to work on cars, but to learn. He accumulated textbooks on biomechanics and orthopedic engineering. He watched hundreds of hours of YouTube videos, listened to podcasts, read medical journals that he barely understood at first, but slowly began to decipher. He studied the mechanics of the human body with the same intensity he had once brought to engines and transmissions, seeing the similarities that others missed. The human body was a machine, the most complex and beautiful machine ever created, but still a machine. It had moving parts and pressure points and centers of balance. It could be understood, analyzed, and with the right tools repaired. Nathan had no medical degree. He had no formal training in anything beyond auto repair. But he had the hands of a gifted mechanic and a mind that could see patterns where others saw chaos. And he had a promise to keep. The garage slowly transformed into something more than just a repair shop. Tucked away in corners and hidden in drawers were Nathan's secret projects. Experimental braces and supports, designed according to principles that medical textbooks would have rejected, but that Nathan's intuition insisted were right. He had never actually used any of them on a real person. The legal implications alone were terrifying, and besides, who would trust their body to a mechanic? But he kept building, kept learning, kept preparing for the day when the chance his brother had spoken of might finally arrive. And then, on an ordinary Thursday morning, a Bentley pulled up outside his garage. While Nathan worked on the Bentley's engine, discovering that the problem was a relatively simple sensor malfunction that had triggered a cascade of warning lights, Victoria Ashford sat in his small living room and tried not to see the things that surrounded her. Toys scattered across the floor, evidence of a childhood being lived. Photographs on the walls showing Nathan and Lily at various ages smiling and happy, despite the obvious modesty of their circumstances. A well-worn copy of Goodnight Moon sitting on an end table, its pages soft with hundreds of readings. Signs of love everywhere she looked, the kind of unpolished, unpretentious love that did not require money or status or achievement. It was everything her own home was not. Victoria had built an empire. Starting from a small biotech startup 20 years ago, she had grown Meridian Biotech into California's leading corporation in regenerative medicine and gene therapy. Her name appeared on Forbes lists and at TED Talks and in academic journals that cited her company's groundbreaking work. She had shaken hands with presidents, dined with royalty, and commanded rooms full of the most powerful people in the world. But all of that prestige, all of that success, all of those billions of dollars had proven completely powerless against the one thing that mattered most. Victoria closed her eyes and tried to push away the memories, but they came anyway. They always did, especially when she looked at her daughter. 11 years ago, on an August evening at Pacific Beach, 8-year-old Emma had been learning to surf. She had been a fearless child, then full of energy and confidence and joy. The ocean was her element, and she approached it with the same determination she brought to everything else in her young life. Victoria had enrolled her in lessons, had bought her the best equipment, had done everything a good mother was supposed to do, except pay attention when it mattered most. That evening, Victoria had been sitting on the sand with her phone in hand, dealing with a crisis related to a $200 million acquisition that had been months in the making. The emails were urgent. The decisions could not wait. She was the CEO, and the company needed her, and she had handled countless emergencies while also being present for her daughter's activities. "Mom, look at me." Emma had called out from the waves, her small voice barely carrying over the sound of the surf. Victoria had waved without lifting her head from her phone. "I see you, sweetheart. Be careful." But she had not seen. She had been typing a response about profit margins and shareholder concerns, while her daughter rode the waves that would steal her future. The wave that night had been stronger than usual, a rogue surge that even experienced surfers would have struggled to handle. Emma had been caught off guard, tumbled and thrown with terrible force. By the time Victoria looked up, having finally pressed send on that crucial email, her daughter's small body was being dragged onto the beach by a lifeguard, and she was not moving. The next hours existed in Victoria's memory as a series of fragmented images and sounds. Paramedics working over Emma's still form. The helicopter ride to the hospital. The surgeon's face grim and exhausted, explaining what had happened. T10 incomplete spinal cord injury. Significant damage to the neural pathways controlling motor function in the lower extremities. She may regain some sensation over time, but walking normally again is extremely unlikely. The word incomplete had seemed like hope at first. Incomplete meant not total. Incomplete meant there was still something to work with, still a chance, still a possibility of recovery. Victoria had clung to that word like a lifeline, pouring her considerable resources into finding the best doctors, the most advanced treatments, the most promising experimental therapies. $6 million over 11 years. Specialists from Stanford, Johns Hopkins, the Mayo Clinic, and a dozen other world-renowned institutions. Cutting-edge treatments that were supposed to stimulate nerve regeneration. Intensive physical therapy programs that left Emma exhausted and demoralized. Braces and devices and technologies that cost more than most people earned in a decade. None of it worked. Some things helped marginally. Most things made no difference at all. A few actually made things worse. And through it all, Victoria watched her daughter transform from a fearless, joyful child into a resigned, defeated young woman who had simply stopped hoping for anything better. The guilt was a physical presence in Victoria's chest, a weight she carried every moment of every day. If she had looked up from her phone just a few seconds earlier, if she had called Emma out of the water when she noticed the waves getting stronger, if she had been the mother her daughter needed instead of the CEO her company demanded. If. The word haunted her nights and poisoned her days. She had tried to make up for it in the only way she knew how, by throwing money at the problem, by finding the best experts, by never giving up the search for a cure. But Emma had stopped believing years ago, and Victoria could not blame her. How many times can hope be raised and dashed before a person simply stops hoping altogether? The red dress Victoria wore today was a kind of armor, a reminder to herself that she was still powerful, still in control, still someone who could command respect and make things happen. But sitting in this modest garage, surrounded by evidence of a love that did not require perfection, she felt that armor cracking. She watched her daughter through the doorway, saw Emma sitting in her wheelchair with the same blank expression she had worn for years, and felt tears threatening to spill from eyes that had learned long ago to stay dry in public. The car trouble that had brought them here was real, but Victoria's choice of this particular garage had not been random. She had heard rumors, whispered stories about a mechanic in a working-class neighborhood who built things. Medical devices, supposedly. Though the details were vague, and Victoria's sources could not confirm anything concrete. She had come here grasping at straws the way she had grasped at 100 straws over the past 11 years. She expected nothing to come of it. She expected to get the car fixed and drive away, and add this to the long list of dead ends she had pursued. But there was something about the way that mechanic had looked at Emma when he first saw her. Not with pity the way most people looked at her daughter, not with discomfort the way many people reacted to disability. He had looked at her with something like recognition, like he was seeing something that others had missed. It was probably nothing. It was almost certainly nothing, but a mother's hope, however battered and diminished, never completely dies. And Victoria found herself watching Nathan Cole through the window as he worked on her car, wondering what exactly he had seen when he looked at her daughter. Inside the garage, Lily had grown bored with chasing butterflies and had wandered over to where Emma sat. The little girl studied the older woman with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood, apparently unbothered by the wheelchair or the silence or any of the social conventions that usually governed such interactions. "Your hair is really pretty," Lily announced. "It is the same color as the princess in my favorite book." Emma looked at the child, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not quite warmth, but perhaps the absence of coldness. "Thank you. You are welcome." Lily climbed onto a nearby stool, bringing herself closer to eye level with Emma. "My daddy says everyone has a story. What is your story?" "I do not have a story worth telling." "Everyone has a story," Lily insisted. "My daddy says even sad stories are important because they teach us things." Emma turned away. But not before Victoria saw something crack in her carefully maintained indifference. It was the first real emotion she had seen in her daughter's face in months, and it made her heart ache with a fresh wave of guilt and hope. What kind of person was this mechanic? Victoria wondered who had raised such an observant, compassionate child. What had his life been like, and what had it cost him? She did not know yet that she was about to find out. She did not know that the answers would change everything. Nathan finished the repairs on the Bentley in just under 2 hours, which was faster than he had expected. The problem had indeed been a sensor malfunction, the kind of thing that happened occasionally, even in the most expensive cars. And once he identified the faulty component, the fix was straightforward. But he did not immediately go tell Victoria that her car was ready. Instead, he stood beside the Bentley for a long moment, wiping his hands on a rag and looking through the window at where Emma sat in her wheelchair. Something had been bothering him since the moment he first saw her, an itch in his mind that would not go away. It was the same feeling he got when an engine sound was just slightly off, when a machine was running well enough to function, but not well enough to be right. He should let it go. He was a mechanic, not a doctor. These people were wealthy beyond his comprehension, and they had clearly consulted the best medical experts in the world. Who was he to think he had noticed something that all those specialists had missed? But Ryan's voice echoed in his memory, as it did every day. Help people like me. Do not let them lose hope. Nathan made a decision. He walked into the living room, bypassing Victoria entirely, and crossed to where Emma sat by the window. She looked up at him, demius, with that blank expression she seemed to wear, like a shield, giving nothing away. Can I ask you something? Nathan said, crouching down so he was at her eye level. About your brace. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly, the first sign of actual engagement he had seen from her. What about it? Is it too tight? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked, and for just a moment the shield slipped. That is a strange question. Maybe. Nathan kept his voice gentle, the same voice he used when coaxing a reluctant engine to reveal its secrets. But I have been watching you since you arrived, and you keep shifting your weight like you are trying to find a position that does not hurt. You grimaced when your wheelchair went over the bump in my garage floor, and you are holding your shoulders at an angle that looks like you are compensating for pressure in the wrong place. Behind him, Nathan heard Victoria stand up, her heels clicking on the floor as she moved closer. Mr. Cole, what exactly are you suggesting? I am not suggesting anything yet. Nathan said, without turning around. I am just asking a question. He returned his attention to Emma. Would you mind if I looked at your brace? Not to do anything with it, just to look. Emma stared at him for a long moment. No one talks to me directly, she said quietly. They talk to my mother about me. They talk around me, over me, past me. You are the first person in years who has actually asked me a question like, I might have something worthwhile to say. Then let me ask you again, Nathan said. May I look at your brace? Something shifted in Emma's expression, a small crack in the wall she had built around herself. Yes, you may. Nathan turned to Victoria. With your permission, Victoria hesitated, her face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Finally, she nodded. But I want to understand what you think you are seeing. That is fair, Nathan agreed. He turned back to Emma. Can you show me where the brace sits? You do not have to remove anything. Just let me see how it is positioned. Emma adjusted her clothing slightly, revealing the edge of the metal and plastic device that wrapped around her lower torso and extended down to her hips. It was clearly expensive, clearly custom-fitted, clearly the product of advanced medical engineering, and to Nathan's eyes clearly wrong. He did not touch it. He just looked the way he looked at engines and transmissions and all the complex machinery that had filled his life. He observed the angle of the metal against Emma's spine, the way the support structures distributed weight, the relationship between the fixed points of the brace and the natural curves of her body. Can I ask when this was fitted? He said. About 2 years ago, Emma answered, after the last one started causing skin problems. And the fitting process. Did they measure you while you were lying down or sitting up being down? I think. They did scans and measurements while I was on a table. Nathan nodded slowly, pieces clicking together in his mind. And when you wear it when you are sitting or trying to move, does it feel like the brace is fighting you? Like you are pushing against it instead of being supported by it? For the first time since he had met her, Emma's eyes showed real surprise. Yes, that is exactly what it feels like. How did you know? Victoria stepped forward, her voice sharp, with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Mr. Cole, you need to explain what you are implying. My daughter has been treated by the best orthopedic specialists in the country. Are you suggesting they all made the same mistake? I am not suggesting they made a mistake, Nathan said finally, standing and turning to face her. I am suggesting they designed a brace for a problem, not for a person. He moved to his workbench and grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil, sketching as he talked. Standard medical devices are designed based on typical injury patterns. They look at what is wrong, and they create a solution that works for most people with that type of problem. But bodies are not standard. Every single person is different, and the way they compensate for an injury is different. And what they need from a support device is different. He showed them the sketch, simple diagrams of force distribution and weight bearing. Emma's injury is incomplete, right? That means some neural pathways are still functional. Victoria nodded slowly. Yes. The doctor said some sensation remained and limited muscle function, which means her body has been adapting for 11 years. Nathan continued. Her muscles have been compensating, developing in ways that are unique to her specific situation. Her left side is stronger than her right. She has developed her own internal way of maintaining balance and managing movement. And the brace, Victoria asked. The brace was designed for someone who cannot walk at all, Nathan said. It immobilizes and supports based on the assumption of zero lower body function. But Emma's body still has some function, and it has been trying to use that function for over a decade. Every time she moves her body, and the brace are working against each other instead of together. Silence filled the small room. Emma was staring at Nathan with an expression he could not quite read. Her mask completely gone now. Victoria's face had gone pale. Are you saying, Emma whispered, that this brace has been making things worse? I am saying it has not been helping you the way it could. Nathan replied carefully. I think you have more potential for mobility than anyone has realized, but the devices you have been using have been suppressing that potential instead of developing it. And how would you know this? Victoria demanded. You are a mechanic. You fix cars. I fix machines, Nathan said simply. And the human body is a machine. The most complicated, most beautiful machine ever created, but still a machine. It has the same principles of leverage and balance and force distribution that every other mechanical structure has. I have spent my whole life learning to see how machines work and how they fail. And when I look at your daughter, I see a machine that has been given the wrong parts. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but Emma spoke first. What would the right parts look like? Nathan hesitated. This was the moment of decision. He could back off now. Tell them he was just speculating, let them drive away, and forget this ever happened. But Ryan's voice was in his head. Do not let them lose hope the way I did. I could show you, Nathan said. If you are willing to let me try. Have you ever had someone see something in you that everyone else missed? Drop a comment below. You might be surprised how many people understand exactly that feeling. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult Nathan had ever had. Victoria Ashford was a businesswoman who had built $1 billion company on her ability to evaluate proposals and identify flaws in arguments. She did not accept claims without evidence, and she had heard too many promises over the past 11 years to take anyone's word on faith. She demanded explanations. She challenged every assumption. She asked questions that Nathan sometimes could not answer because he did not have the formal medical vocabulary to describe what his intuition was telling him. But Emma was different. From the moment Nathan had asked that first simple question about her brace, something had shifted in the young woman. She was engaged now, present in a way she clearly had not been in years. She asked her own questions, describing sensations and experiences that she had never bothered to share with the expensive specialists who talked about her rather than to her. And slowly, through the back and forth of that conversation, a picture emerged. Nathan explained that standard orthopedic devices were designed based on average measurements and typical injury patterns, which meant they worked reasonably well for most patients, but optimally for almost no one. For someone with an incomplete spinal injury like Emma's, this was especially problematic because the standard approach assumed total loss of function below the injury site. But Emma still had some function. Her left leg could bear limited weight. Certain muscles in her lower body still responded to nerve signals, just not strongly enough to support normal walking. For 11 years, these residual capabilities had been ignored by devices designed for someone who had none. "I cannot promise anything," Nathan said, for what felt like the 100th time. "I am not a doctor. I cannot guarantee results. What I can do is build you a brace designed specifically for your body, for the way you move, for the function you still have. It might help, it might not, but I believe it is worth trying." "And you would do this for free?" Victoria asked, her voice carrying the suspicion of someone who knew that nothing in life was truly free. Why Nathan was quiet for a moment, looking at the photograph of Ryan that sat on his workbench, visible through the doorway. "Because I made a promise to someone who cannot cash the check himself, and because I believe your daughter deserves better than what she has been given." Victoria followed his gaze to the photograph, and something in her expression softened. "Who was he?" "My brother. Ryan. He had a spinal injury too. T6. Complete, not incomplete, so there was no residual function to work with. He lived for 4 years after the accident before complications took him." "I am sorry," Victoria said. And for the first time, her voice carried genuine warmth rather than the practiced sympathy of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. "He made me promise that if I ever got the chance to help someone like him, I would." Nathan's voice was steady, but his eyes were bright with emotion he could not quite suppress. "Your daughter is that chance. I have been preparing for this moment for 5 years, learning everything I could about how bodies move and how they heal. I never thought I would actually get the opportunity to use what I learned. But here you are." Silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and doubt. Then Emma spoke. "I want to try." Victoria turned to her daughter, startled. "Emma, we should discuss this. We should consult with your regular doctors. We should—" "No." Emma's voice was firm, in a way it had not been in years. "I have done everything you and the doctors wanted. I have tried every treatment, worn every device, sat through every therapy session. None of it worked. None of it even came close to working. And this man is the first person who has looked at me and seen something other than a problem to be managed." Emma turned to face Nathan directly. "You really think there is hope?" "I think hope is always worth having," Nathan said. "Even when it is risky. Even when it might lead to disappointment. Giving up is guaranteed failure. Hope at least has a chance." For a long moment, mother and daughter looked at each other, communicating silently in the way that only family can. Finally, Victoria sighed, and the rigid tension in her shoulders relaxed just slightly. "1 week," she said. "We will come back in 1 week. You can take whatever measurements you need, and then we will see." Nathan nodded, not allowing himself to feel the surge of excitement that threatened to overwhelm him. 1 week. That is enough time. As Victoria and Emma prepared to leave the Bentley, now running perfectly, Lily appeared in the doorway. "Are you coming back?" she asked Emma. "I want to show you my dollhouse. And my dinosaurs. Do you like dinosaurs?" Emma looked at the small, earnest face and felt something crack open in her chest. "I do not know much about dinosaurs," she admitted. "That is okay," Lily beamed. "I will teach you everything. And my daddy will help you walk, and then you can play with me properly. Will that not be fun?" Emma could not help it. She smiled. It was small and tentative and clearly unpracticed, but it was real. Yes, that would be fun. As the Bentley pulled away from the garage, Nathan stood watching until it disappeared around the corner. Then he turned back to his workshop, to the books and notes and half-finished projects that had been waiting for this moment. 1 week to design something revolutionary. 1 week to keep a promise 5 years in the making. He got to work. The week that followed was unlike any Nathan had experienced since Ryan's death. He worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Sleeping only when exhaustion made it impossible to continue eating, only when Lily insisted on sharing her meals with him. His garage transformed into something that looked more like a laboratory than an auto shop. The workbench that usually held engine parts and transmission components was now covered with anatomical diagrams, biomechanical calculations, and dozens of sketches showing different approaches to the problem he was trying to solve. Every night after Lily had fallen asleep, Nathan sat in the quiet darkness and talked to Ryan. "I think I understand now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why you could not find hope, even when everyone was telling you to keep fighting. It is not that hope was impossible. It is that everyone was looking at you through the wrong lens. They saw your injury, and they tried to fix your injury. But you were not just an injury. You were a person who happened to have an injury, and that is a completely different problem." He picked up the photograph of his brother studying the face he would never see again. Emma is the same way. Everyone has been so focused on her spinal damage that they forgot it. She is not her spinal damage. She is a human being with a body that has been adapting and compensating for 11 years. Her body already knows how to work around the injury. It just needs the right support to do what it has been trying to do all along. The design came together piece by piece, each component refined through countless iterations, until it was exactly right. The frame would be titanium strong enough to provide real support, but light enough not to restrict movement. The joints would be adaptive, allowing natural motion in all directions, while still maintaining stability. The padding would be positioned based on Emma's specific pressure points, not the standard pressure points assumed by medical textbooks. But the most important innovation was invisible: the philosophy behind the design. Standard braces worked by restricting movement and providing rigid support. Nathan's design would work by enabling movement and providing responsive support, supporting Emma's body in doing what it naturally wanted to do, rather than forcing it into positions decided by someone else. Lily became his unofficial assistant during the days, sitting on her overturned bucket and watching him work with the same focused attention she always brought to important things. "Daddy, why is this one so special?" she asked one afternoon, pointing at the emerging device. "Because it is not trying to replace what someone lost." Nathan explained, "It is trying to help them use what they still have." Lily considered this. Like when you fix Mrs. Patterson's car, and you do not give her a whole new car. You just make the old car work better. Nathan smiled. Exactly like that. Very smart, sweetheart. Is Emma going to be able to walk when you are done? I hope so. But I do not know for sure. Sometimes we do everything right, and things still do not work out the way we want. But you are going to try anyway. Of course, Nathan met his daughter's eyes seriously. We always try, Lily, even when we are not sure we will succeed, because not trying is guaranteed failure, but trying at least has a chance. Uncle Ryan would be proud of you, Lily said, with the simple certainty of childhood. Nathan's throat tightened. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. The days blurred together in a haze of work and exhaustion and desperate hope. Nathan consulted the medical files Victoria had reluctantly shared, studying every scan and measurement and doctor's note until he knew Emma's injury almost as well as he knew his own body. He found patterns that the specialists had missed because they were looking for different things. Small details that did not fit the expected picture, but made perfect sense when viewed through the lens of biomechanics rather than pure medicine. Her left side was not just stronger than her right. It was stronger in a specific way that suggested certain neural pathways had partially healed over the years. The muscle atrophy in her legs was not uniform, indicating that some muscles were still receiving signals, even if those signals were not strong enough to produce visible movement. Most importantly, the records showed that Emma had actually gotten worse over the past 5 years. Not better. Not because her injury had deteriorated, but because the devices she had been using were actively suppressing the limited function she still had. Her body had been trying to heal, and the medical establishment had been fighting against that healing without even realizing it. By the end of the week, the brace was complete. It looked nothing like the device Emma currently wore, sleeker and more organic in its design, almost like something that had grown rather than been built. Nathan held it in his hands and felt the weight of everything it represented. This was either the fulfillment of his promise to Ryan or the biggest failure of his life. There was no middle ground. Okay, brother, he whispered, looking at Ryan's photograph one more time. Let us see if I understood what you were trying to tell me. Victoria and Emma returned exactly 1 week later, their Bentley looking as out of place as it had the first time. But something was different now. The tension between mother and daughter seemed slightly less rigid, and Victoria's expression held something that had not been there before: nervous hope. Lily was waiting for them at the garage door, practically vibrating with excitement. Emma, you came back. I have so much to show you. And Daddy finished your special helper. Do you want to see? Emma actually smiled as she was wheeled into the garage. Hello, Lily. Yes, I would like to see what your father has made. Nathan emerged from the workshop area, the new brace in his hands. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, and several days of stubble on his face, but his expression was calm and focused. Before we do this, he said, I need to explain what this is and what it is not. This is not a cure. I cannot fix your spinal injury. What I have tried to do is create a device that works with your body instead of against it. If I am right, it should allow you to use the function you still have more effectively. If I am wrong, it will not help at all. And if it works, Emma asked. What does that look like? I honestly do not know, Nathan admitted. Maybe you will be able to stand with support. Maybe you will be able to take a few steps with a cane. Maybe you will just feel more comfortable than you do now. I cannot predict the outcome because no one has ever tried this specific approach before. Victoria stepped forward. Her businesswoman's instincts demanding more information. What makes this approach different from what she has tried before? Nathan laid the brace on his workbench and pointed to different components as he explained. Standard braces are designed to immobilize and support, based on the assumption that the patient has no useful function below the injury site. But Emma's injury is incomplete, which means she still has some neural pathways working even if they are not strong enough to produce visible movement. He traced the lines of the brace's frame. This device is designed to detect and amplify those signals instead of suppressing them. The joints are adaptive, meaning they will respond to Emma's natural movement patterns rather than forcing her into predetermined positions. The support structure shifts based on where her weight is distributed at any given moment, which means it can help her balance rather than making her fight for balance against a rigid frame. "You invented this approach yourself?" Victoria asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice now, not just skepticism. "The principles are not new. Athletes and physical therapists have understood adaptive support for decades. What is different is applying those principles to a spinal injury patient in this specific way." The medical establishment tends to be conservative about trying new approaches because the risks of failure are high and the consequences can be severe. But they have had 11 years to help Emma, and their conservative approaches have not worked. "So you are asking us to take a risk that professionals have been unwilling to take," Victoria said. "I am asking Emma to take that risk," Nathan corrected gently. "It is her body. It has to be her choice." Both adults turned to look at Emma, who had been listening to the entire conversation with an expression Nathan could not quite read. "Every device I have ever worn has felt like a prison," Emma said slowly. "Like something designed to remind me of everything I cannot do." She looked at the brace on Nathan's workbench. "This one looks different, less like a cage and more like a piece of armor." "That is exactly what it is meant to be," Nathan said. "Protection and support for the function you still have, not restriction and suppression." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Let us try it." The fitting process took nearly an hour. Nathan worked with painstaking care, making tiny adjustments based on Emma's feedback, ensuring that every component was positioned exactly where it needed to be. Victoria watched in silence, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face a mixture of hope and terror. Lily sat on her bucket and provided commentary. "That piece looks like a dragon wing. Is that one for keeping her balanced? Daddy is really good at balance. He taught me to ride a bike without training wheels last summer." Finally, Nathan stepped back. "How does it feel?" Emma's expression was strange, almost confused. "It does not hurt. It should not hurt. That is the point." "No, you do not understand." Emma's voice was shaking slightly. "My current brace always hurts. There is always pressure in the wrong places, always something digging in or rubbing wrong. I have gotten so used to the discomfort that I stopped noticing it. But this feels like nothing. It feels like it is not even there." Nathan felt relief flood through him. That is exactly what it should feel like. The brace is meant to support you without you being aware of it, like a good suspension in a car. You should not feel the work it is doing. "Okay." Emma took a deep breath. "What happens now?" "We see if you can stand." The moment stretched out like a held breath. Nathan positioned himself on one side of Emma's wheelchair, Victoria on the other. Lily watched from her bucket, unusually quiet, sensing the importance of what was about to happen. "Take my hands," Nathan said. "We are going to help you up, but I want you to do as much of the work as you can. Do not let us lift you. Try to push yourself up." Emma nodded, her face pale with a combination of fear and determination. She gripped Nathan's hands, felt Victoria take hold of her other arm, and began to push. The first attempt was a failure. Her legs simply would not cooperate, the muscles too weak from years of disuse to generate enough force. Again, Nathan said calmly, "Do not get discouraged. Your body needs to remember how to do this." The second attempt was marginally better. Emma managed to get halfway up before her legs gave out, and she collapsed back into the wheelchair. "One more time," Nathan encouraged. "Remember, you are not fighting the brace. Let it help you." Emma closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tried again. This time, something was different. She felt the brace responding to her movement's subtle shifts in support that seemed to anticipate what she was trying to do. Instead of fighting against rigid resistance, she felt like she was being guided, assisted, helped in ways she could not quite articulate. And then she was standing, not stable, not independent. Nathan and Victoria were still supporting most of her weight, but her feet were on the ground. Her legs were bearing some of the load, and for the first time in 11 years, she was upright. "Oh my God," Victoria whispered. "I am standing." Emma's voice was barely audible. "I am actually standing." Nathan's face was wet with tears he had not noticed shedding. "Yes, you are. Now let us see if you can take a step." What followed was not a miracle in the Hollywood sense. There was no dramatic moment where Emma suddenly walked across the room, no instant transformation from disabled to able-bodied. What happened was smaller than that, and in many ways more profound. One step, then another, then another. Each one was uncertain, wobbly, requiring support from Nathan and Victoria on either side. But they were real steps, real movement, real progress. Emma's legs, which had been written off as useless by every specialist her mother's money could buy, were bearing weight and producing motion. By the 5th step, Emma was crying. By the 10th, she was laughing through her tears, a sound Victoria had not heard from her daughter in years. And Nathan stood there, supporting this young woman through her first real steps in over a decade, and heard his brother's voice in his memory. "Do not let them lose hope the way I did." "I kept my word, Ryan," Nathan whispered so quietly that no one else could hear. "I kept my promise." From her spot by the doorway, Lily burst into excited motion. "You did it!" "Daddy, you made a miracle. I knew you could do it." "I told Emma you could fix anything." She ran toward them, throwing her arms around her father's legs, then around Emma's waist, then around Victoria, who was sobbing too hard to speak. For a moment, all 4 of them were tangled together in an embrace that crossed every boundary of wealth and class and circumstance. Emma looked at Nathan through her tears. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Nathan shook his head. "You did this, Emma. Your body did this. I just gave it the tools it needed." Victoria finally found her voice. "Mr. Cole, Nathan, I do not know how to thank you for this." "You do not need to thank me," Nathan said. "This is what I promised my brother I would do. You gave me the chance to keep that promise. If anything, I should thank you." Lily tugged on Emma's arm. "Now, you can play with me properly. Do you want to see my dollhouse and my dinosaurs?" Emma laughed, a real laugh, full and joyful and completely unguarded. "Yes, Lily. I would love to see your dinosaurs." As Lily led Emma slowly and carefully toward the living area, Nathan and Victoria stood together in the garage, watching them go. "She is going to need ongoing support," Nathan said quietly. "Physical therapy, regular adjustments to the brace, as her strength improves, probably years of work before she reaches her full potential." "I understand," Victoria said. "Whatever she needs for as long as she needs it, I will make sure she has it, and I will be here to help, for as long as you want me." Victoria turned to look at him, really look at him, this grease-stained mechanic who had accomplished what billions of dollars had failed to achieve. "I do not understand you," she said softly. "You could have charged us anything. You could have demanded recognition, financial reward, anything you wanted. Why are you doing this for free?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, looking at the photograph of Ryan on his workbench. Because some things are not about money. Some things are about keeping promises to people we love, even when they are not here to see us do it. My brother died believing he had no hope. I do not ever want anyone else to feel that way, if there is anything I can do to prevent it. Victoria nodded slowly. Then she did something that surprised them both. She reached out and took Nathan's hand, holding it gently in her own. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to families around the world." For one beautiful month, everything seemed perfect. Emma made remarkable progress, graduating from supported steps to walking with a cane, then occasionally walking short distances, completely unassisted. Her body, freed from the restrictions of devices that had been fighting against it for years, responded with a vitality that exceeded even Nathan's hopes. Victoria came to the garage regularly, ostensibly to monitor Emma's progress, but increasingly to spend time in the modest space that had become a second home. She found peace there that she could not find in her corporate offices or luxurious house, a simplicity that had been missing from her life for longer than she wanted to admit. Lily adopted Emma as an honorary big sister, dragging her to see every new drawing, every school project, every interesting bug discovered in the backyard. And Emma, who had spent 11 years withdrawing from the world, found herself opening up to this small, enthusiastic child in ways she had never expected. The story of Emma's recovery spread quietly through the medical community, at first whispered conversations between doctors who could not explain what they were hearing. A 19-year-old patient with an incomplete spinal injury, given up on by some of the best specialists in the world, was suddenly walking again. And the credit apparently belonged to a mechanic with no medical training, who worked out of a garage in a working-class neighborhood. Some people responded with curiosity, others responded with skepticism, and a few responded with something much darker. OrthoCare Medical was one of the largest manufacturers of orthopedic devices in the United States. Their products were used in hospitals and rehabilitation centers across the country, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue. They had invested heavily in developing braces and supports for spinal injury patients, devices that represented the cutting edge of conventional medical thinking. And now a mechanic had apparently created something that worked better than anything they had ever produced, something that threatened to expose their expensive products as inadequate, something that could potentially devastate their market share if word got out. Richard Brennan, Vice President of Legal Affairs for OrthoCare, arrived at Nathan's garage on a Tuesday morning in a black town car that looked almost as expensive as Victoria's Bentley. He was a large man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Mr. Cole," he said, extending a hand that Nathan hesitated before shaking. "My name is Richard Brennan. I represent OrthoCare Medical. I wonder if we might have a word." Nathan looked at the business card Brennan had pressed into his hand, then at the man himself. The instinct that had served him well throughout his life was screaming a warning. "What can I do for you, Mr. Brennan? I have heard some interesting rumors about the work you have been doing here." Brennan's smile widened slightly, but his eyes remained cold. "Rumors about medical devices you have been creating. Devices that you have been fitting to patients without proper licensing, without FDA approval, without medical supervision." Nathan felt ice form in his stomach. "I have been helping a friend. A family friend. Nothing more. A friend who happened to have a spinal cord injury. A friend for whom you designed and built a custom orthopedic brace. A friend who is now walking when every legitimate medical expert said she never would. Brennan's voice hardened. That is not helping a friend, Mr. Cole. That is practicing medicine without a license. That is manufacturing and distributing unapproved medical devices. That is potentially fraud if you received any compensation whatsoever. I did not receive any compensation, Nathan said firmly. I did this for free, which just makes it worse in a way. It suggests you knew what you were doing was illegal and tried to structure the arrangement to avoid prosecution. Brennan pulled a thick envelope from his jacket and laid it on Nathan's workbench. This is a formal cease and desist letter from OrthoCare Medical. We are demanding that you immediately stop any and all activities related to the design, manufacture, or distribution of medical devices. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including, but not limited to, civil suits and referral to federal authorities for criminal prosecution. Nathan stared at the envelope, his mind racing. You are threatened by what I have built. I am not threatened by anything, Mr. Cole. I am protecting the integrity of a medical device industry that exists to keep patients safe from exactly this kind of unlicensed, unregulated, potentially dangerous activity. Brennan's smile returned. But we are not unreasonable people. We are prepared to offer you a settlement. Sign an agreement to never build another medical device, never speak publicly about what you have done, never contact Emma Ashford or her family again. In exchange, we will not file charges, and we will provide you with a one-time payment of $200,000. Brennan spread his hands. It is a generous offer, all things considered. You can walk away from this with money in your pocket and your freedom intact. Nathan looked at the man at his expensive suit and his practiced smile and his complete certainty that money and lawyers could solve any problem. And you will provide me with a one-time payment of $200,000. That is correct. And what happens to Emma? What happens to the other people who might benefit from what I have learned? That is not your concern anymore. If Ms. Ashford wants medical treatment, she can get it from licensed professionals using approved devices. That is how the medical field is supposed to work. Nathan picked up the envelope and held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Then he handed it back to Brennan. Brennan's smile froze. I am sorry, I said no. I will not sign your agreement. I will not take your money, and I will not stop helping people who need my help. Mr. Cole, I do not think you understand the consequences of refusing this offer. We have lawyers who have destroyed people with far more resources than you possess. We can tie you up in litigation for decades, drain every penny you have, make your life a living hell. Maybe. Nathan's voice was steady, even though his heart was pounding. But I made a promise to my brother, and I intend to keep it. I will not apologize for helping Emma. I will not pretend that what I did was wrong. And I will not let you bully me into abandoning the work that gives my life meaning. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then, Brennan's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by something cold and hard. You will regret this decision, Mr. Cole. I guarantee it. He turned and walked out of the garage, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete. Nathan watched him go, then looked down at his hands, which were shaking slightly. The storm had arrived. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Nathan's life. OrthoCare followed through on their threats. They filed a formal complaint with the FDA, alleging that Nathan had manufactured and distributed unapproved medical devices. They gave interviews to local news outlets, painting him as a dangerous quack who put patients at risk with his unlicensed treatments. They hired private investigators to dig into his background, looking for anything that could be used against him. The news coverage was devastating. Headlines screamed about the garage mechanic who thought he knew better than doctors about the reckless amateur who endangered vulnerable patients about the fraud who should be in prison. Customers stopped coming to Nathan's garage, afraid of being associated with someone under federal investigation. His income dropped to almost nothing. Victoria offered to hire lawyers to fund his defense to use her considerable resources to fight back against OrthoCare's campaign. Nathan refused. "If I let you pay for my lawyers," he explained, "they will say I was just doing this for your money. They will say I was a con artist who took advantage of a desperate mother. Every news story will become about the billionaire protecting her pet mechanic instead of about whether what I did actually helped Emma." "But you cannot fight them alone," Victoria protested. "They have unlimited resources. I do not have to fight them. I just have to tell the truth and let the truth speak for itself." But the truth was having a hard time being heard over the noise of OrthoCare's publicity machine. Nathan began receiving hate mail, angry letters from people who believed the news stories and thought he was a monster. Someone threw a rock through his garage window. Lily started coming home from school in tears because other children were repeating things they had heard their parents say. Nathan held his daughter at night and wondered if he had made the right choice, wondered if keeping his promise to Ryan was worth destroying his and Lily's lives. And then on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after Brennan's visit, a stranger appeared at the garage. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore no jewelry except a simple watch, and her clothes were expensive, but understated the wardrobe of someone who had nothing to prove. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice carrying the precise diction of an academic. "My name is Dr. Helena Crawford. I am a professor of biomedical engineering at Stanford University. I have been following your case in the news, and I was hoping you might allow me to examine the device you built for Emma Ashford." Nathan studied her face, looking for signs of deception or hostility. "Why, because I have spent 30 years studying orthopedic devices, and I have never seen anything like what the news reports are describing. Either you are a fraud who got lucky, or you have made a genuine breakthrough that deserves serious scientific attention. I would like to determine which one it is." Nathan hesitated, but something about Dr. Crawford's directness appealed to him. She was not offering sympathy or outrage. She was offering objective evaluation. That was what he needed. "Okay," he said. "Come in. I will show you what I built." For the next 30 minutes, Dr. Crawford examined Emma's brace in complete silence. She rotated each joint, tested each component, made detailed notes in a leather-bound notebook. Nathan watched her work, recognizing the same focused intensity he brought to his own examinations of complex machinery. Finally, she looked up, and Nathan was startled to see tears in her eyes. "Where did you learn about dynamic center of balance distribution?" she asked. "I did not learn it anywhere," Nathan admitted. "I figured it out myself based on observing how Emma's body moved and what it seemed to need." Dr. Crawford removed her glasses and wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "Mr. Cole, I have been working in this field for 3 decades. I have seen every major innovation in orthopedic device design. And what you have built here in this garage with no formal training is more advanced than anything currently on the market." Nathan stared at her. "You are saying it is good. I am saying it is genius. The principles you have applied, the adaptive support design, the responsive force distribution. These are ideas that researchers at major universities have been struggling to implement for years, and you have done it with workshop tools and intuition." "But I am not a doctor," Nathan said. "I do not have any credentials. Credentials are just pieces of paper. Knowledge is what matters, and the knowledge embodied in this device is extraordinary." Dr. Crawford replaced her glasses and met Nathan's eyes squarely. "I want to help you, Mr. Cole. I want to testify on your behalf, explain to the FDA that what you have created is not only safe, but superior to existing alternatives." Nathan felt a surge of hope, but forced himself to be cautious. "If you do that, OrthoCare will come after you. They will attack your reputation, your career." "I do not care." Dr. Crawford's voice was firm. "I became a scientist because I believed in progress, in innovation, in helping people live better lives. If the medical establishment is trying to destroy a genuine breakthrough because it threatens corporate profits, then I have a moral obligation to stand against that." She paused, then added softly, "Besides, I had a brother too. He died from complications of a back injury 20 years ago. I have spent my entire career trying to prevent other families from experiencing what we did. This is personal for me too." Nathan extended his hand, and Dr. Crawford shook it firmly. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for believing in what I have tried to do." "Thank me after we win," Dr. Crawford replied. "Because make no mistake, this is going to be a fight. But it is a fight worth having." The FDA hearing took place on a gray November morning in a federal building that smelled of bureaucracy and old coffee. Nathan wore the only suit he owned, a dark blue ensemble that had served him at his wife's funeral and his brother's, and now would serve him at the moment that would determine the rest of his life. Victoria and Emma sat in the gallery behind him, Emma walking unassisted to her seat in a demonstration that made the FDA officials murmur among themselves. Lily was at home with a neighbor too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to know that Daddy was worried about something important. The hearing room was full. OrthoCare had sent a team of lawyers and expert witnesses, all of them confident and well prepared. Richard Brennan sat at their table, his cold smile firmly in place. But Nathan was not alone. Dr. Helena Crawford sat beside him, her Stanford credentials lending weight to his case. And something else had happened in the weeks since her first visit to his garage. Something unexpected. Other scientists had come forward, researchers who had been quietly skeptical of OrthoCare's products for years, engineers who had seen promising innovations suppressed because they threatened corporate interests, medical professionals who believed that helping patients should matter more than protecting market share. The hearing proceeded through the morning with OrthoCare's lawyers presenting their case in meticulous detail. Nathan listened to himself described as reckless, irresponsible, dangerous. He listened to experts explain why his work should be destroyed and his freedom taken away. Then it was Dr. Crawford's turn. She approached the podium with the calm confidence of someone who had given testimony in settings far more intimidating than this one. She spoke clearly and directly, explaining the technical innovations in Nathan's design, the ways it improved upon existing devices. The reasons Emma's remarkable recovery was not a fluke, but a predictable outcome of sound engineering principles. "Mr. Cole has done something remarkable," Dr. Crawford concluded. "Without formal training, without institutional support, without any of the resources that major corporations take for granted, he has advanced the field of orthopedic device design by a decade. His work deserves recognition and support, not persecution." The FDA panel members asked questions, some skeptical, some curious. Nathan answered as honestly as he could, explaining his process, his reasoning, his motivations. He told them about Ryan, about the promise he had made, about the years he had spent preparing for this moment, without knowing if it would ever come. Finally, the panel requested to examine the brace itself. Nathan handed over the device he had poured his heart into, watching as the officials tested it, measured it, analyzed it with equipment that looked far more sophisticated than anything in his garage. They consulted with Dr. Crawford. They reviewed the data she had brought, and then they retired to deliberate. The wait was excruciating. Nathan sat in the hallway outside the hearing room, his hands clasped between his knees, trying not to think about what would happen if the decision went against him. Victoria sat beside him in silence, her presence a comfort he had not expected. Emma paced the hallway on legs that had been useless a few months ago, living proof of what Nathan's work could accomplish. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably less than one, the panel returned. Mr. Cole, the lead official, said, "We have reached a decision." Nathan stood, his heart pounding so hard he could barely hear. The official's face was unreadable. "We find that the device you created for Ms. Ashford represents a significant advancement in orthopedic design. However, you did create and distribute a medical device without proper licensing, which is a violation of federal regulations." Nathan felt his stomach drop. "Therefore," the official continued, "we are issuing you a special provisional license, effective immediately. You are authorized to continue designing orthopedic devices under the direct supervision of Dr. Helena Crawford. This license is valid for 2 years, during which time you will be required to complete a formal certification program in biomedical engineering. Upon successful completion, the license will become permanent." Nathan stared at the official, unable to process what he was hearing. "Furthermore, the panel commends you for your dedication to helping patients who had been failed by conventional approaches. Your work has opened new possibilities that deserve further research and development. We encourage you to continue within proper legal frameworks." Behind Nathan, Emma let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Victoria grabbed his arm and squeezed so hard it almost hurt. Richard Brennan's face had gone pale with fury. He stood abruptly and stormed out of the hearing room, his team of lawyers trailing behind him. Nathan looked down at the official letter being handed to him, his vision blurred by tears. "Miguel," he whispered. "I did it. I kept my promise." 1 year later, on a perfect California afternoon, Nathan stood on the sand at Pacific Beach and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. So much had changed since that Thursday morning, when a Bentley had pulled up outside his garage. Cole Mobility Solutions occupied a modest building in San Diego, now dedicated to helping patients who had been failed by conventional medical approaches. The plaque at the entrance read, "Making Hope Walk Again," dedicated to Ryan Cole, 1990 to 2018. Dr. Crawford served as scientific advisor, mentoring Nathan through the biomedical engineering certification he was now halfway to completing. Victoria had quietly funded the center's establishment, asking for nothing in return except the chance to see other families experience the hope her own family had found. Lily, now 8 years old, helped her father in the workshop on weekends, drawing designs and learning to hold tools, already showing signs of the same intuitive understanding of machines that Nathan possessed. And Emma, 20 years old now, worked at the center as a physical therapy assistant while completing her degree in rehabilitation science. She had become living proof of what Nathan's approach could accomplish, inspiring every patient who walked through the doors. More than 300 patients had been helped in the past year. 80% of them had experienced significant improvement in mobility. Some had gone from wheelchairs to walking unassisted. Others had gained smaller, but still life-changing improvements. Nathan had never made much money from the work. He charged on a sliding scale, and many patients paid nothing at all. The old garage was still there, still open for neighbors who needed their cars fixed by someone who would not overcharge them. Some things were more important than profit. On this particular afternoon, Nathan had brought Lily, Victoria, and Emma to the beach, where Emma's accident had happened 13 years earlier. It was time, Victoria had said. Time to reclaim this place from the grief it had caused. Emma stood at the water's edge, letting the waves wash over her feet. She had been standing for several minutes now, her balance steady, her legs strong. "Mom," she called out, her voice carrying over the sound of the surf. "Come here!" Victoria kicked off her shoes and walked across the sand to join her daughter. For a long moment they stood together in silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. "I forgive you," Emma said quietly. "I forgave you a long time ago, but I need you to hear it now. The accident was not your fault. It was just a wave." Victoria's composure, carefully maintained for so many years, finally shattered. She pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, sobbing with the release of over a decade of guilt. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry I was not watching." "You are watching now. That is what matters." Nathan stood back, holding Lily's hand, giving mother and daughter their moment. His own eyes were wet, but he was smiling. Daddy Lily tugged at his hand. His Uncle Ryan, watching Nathan, knelt down beside his daughter, looking up at the painted sky. "I think he is, sweetheart. I think he is very proud." "Good." Lily nodded seriously. "Because you kept your promise. And keeping promises is the most important thing in the whole world." "Yes, sweetheart. It is." The four of them stayed on the beach until the last light faded from the sky, a family formed not by blood, but by circumstance and kindness, and the stubborn refusal to give up on hope. Sometimes miracles do not come from money, or fame, or advanced technology. Sometimes they come from a pair of calloused hands and a promise made to a brother who never got to see it kept. Friends, if this story reminded you that miracles do not require millions of dollars, that sometimes the hands that heal belong to people the world overlooks, please share it with someone who needs to hear that message today. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. And remember, the next time you see someone struggling, really look at them. Really listen. You might be the miracle they have been waiting for. If this story touched your heart, do not forget to hit the like button and leave a comment telling us what part moved you the most. Share this video with your friends and family, because stories like this deserve to be heard by as many people as possible. And make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another journey of hope, kindness, and everyday miracles. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.